I walked into my parents' house for what was supposed to be a normal Sunday dinner and saw my full legal name already printed on a mortgage application I had never seen before, sitting in the center of the dining table like the only thing missing from their plan was my signature. That was the first moment I understood they were not asking me for a favor. They had already built the decision around me, wrapped it in family duty, and placed it where I would have to look unreasonable if I questioned it. My mom had called me earlier that afternoon with her casual voice, the one she uses when she wants something but does not want the conversation to sound like it has a purpose. She said she was making dinner, mentioned my favorite food like that detail was accidental, and told me my brother Jason would be there because he had been stressed lately and needed everyone around him. Nothing about the call sounded urgent, but looking back, that should have been the warning. My mother never gathered people just because she missed them. There was always a reason, and the reason was usually waiting behind the nice tone. I almost stayed home because I had worked late most of the week, my laundry was still sitting in the basket, and I wanted one quiet evening where nobody needed anything from me. The problem was that skipping family dinner had a way of becoming its own family event. If I stayed home, my mother would call the next day and ask if I was avoiding everyone. My father would tell me I needed to make time for family, and Jason would send some lazy joke about me being too important now, which meant that by Wednesday, I would somehow be the guy who abandoned everyone because he wanted to sit on his couch in peace. So I went anyway, mostly because I did not have the energy for the guilt campaign that would follow if I did not. I remember sitting in my car outside their house for a minute before going in. The porch light was on, my dad's truck was in the driveway, and Jason's car was already there, which caught my attention because he was never early unless somebody else had pushed him to be. Even then, I told myself not to read too much into it, because reading too much into my family was how you ended up feeling crazy before anything actually happened. When I walked inside, everything looked normal at first. My dad was in the living room with the TV on low, watching sports without really watching. My mom was moving around the kitchen, wiping counters that were already clean, checking the oven too many times, and doing that restless busy work she falls into when she is waiting for something to start. Jason was sitting at the dining table with a glass of water in front of him and his phone face down beside it. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. Jason looked up too quickly. "Hey." My mom turned around with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You made it." "Yeah," I said. "You said dinner." "Of course. Sit down for a minute. We're almost ready." I took 2 steps toward the dining room and saw the folder. It was not tucked beside the fruit bowl or placed casually near someone's plate. It was centered on the table, thick, clean, and lined up with the edge like someone had positioned it there on purpose. The top page had a bank logo on it, and underneath that, my name was printed in a section marked for a co-borrower or co-signer. I do not remember the exact wording because my brain caught up with the meaning before it bothered with every detail. "What is that?" I asked, stopping beside the chair. Jason did not answer me. He glanced at my mom first, and that tiny look told me more than his words would have. My mom stepped in immediately. "It's just some paperwork. We'll talk after we eat." The way she said it made my stomach tighten, because people say, "after we eat," when they want to control the timing of a conversation, not when something is truly harmless. I pulled out the chair but did not sit yet. "Why is my name on it?" My dad answered from the living room without turning around. "It's nothing complicated. Just something we want to go over together." That word, together, landed wrong because nothing about that folder looked like a group discussion. It looked like a plan that had been built somewhere else and delivered to the table already assembled. Dinner started anyway, because my family is very good at pretending the obvious thing in the room is invisible until my mother decides the timing is right. Plates were passed around, my dad asked about work, my mom talked about a neighbor's fence, and Jason barely touched his food while he kept glancing between me and the folder. Every normal sentence felt like padding around the real subject, and the longer they delayed it, the more obvious it became that the delay was part of the pressure. Eventually, my mom set her fork down, folded her hands, and looked at me with the face she uses when she thinks she is about to be reasonable. "All right," she said. "Let's just talk about it." She slid the folder toward me. "Your brother found a really good house," she said. "It's in a good area, the price is reasonable for the market, and it would be a solid investment if he moves quickly." I kept my hands in my lap. "Okay, and he needs a little support to get approved," she said. Jason leaned forward, like he had been waiting for the handoff. "It's just a cosign. It's not a big deal." I looked at him for a second because I wanted to make sure I heard him correctly. You want me to co-sign your mortgage? It's temporary, he said quickly. Just until I refinance or my income looks better on paper. When would that happen? I asked. He hesitated long enough for the answer to become clear. My mom jumped in before the silence made him look bad. Don't make it sound bigger than it is. This is what families do. You help each other. I opened the folder because I wanted to see exactly how far this had gone, and because I needed something to look at besides their faces. The documents included the property address, loan numbers, estimated payments, and my name typed into sections that were not blank placeholders. It was not a loose idea scribbled on a napkin. It was prepared. You already filled this out, I said. We had to see what it would look like, my dad said, finally coming into the dining room. It's preliminary. Preliminary usually means you ask the person before putting their name on legal paperwork. Jason shifted in his chair. They just needed numbers. Nobody signed anything. They ran numbers using my name, I said. My mom's expression tightened. You're acting like we committed fraud. We didn't sign your name. We just explored the option. The word explored bothered me because it made the whole thing sound harmless, like they had wandered into this by accident instead of taking steps they knew I might not agree with. You should have asked me first, I said. We are asking you. She replied, sharper now. No, I said. You're presenting it like it's already happening. That was when her warmth disappeared completely. Why are you making this difficult? I'm not making it difficult. I'm asking why my name is on a mortgage application I never agreed to. Because we knew you would help, she said, with a confidence that made my chest go tight. I turned to Jason. You didn't think to call me? He gave a weak shrug. I figured you'd say yes. That hurt more than the request itself, because it told me that in his mind, I was not someone with a decision to make. I was a resource, something dependable that could be used when the family needed a problem solved. Why can't you get approved on your own? I asked. It's just timing, he said. My credit is fine, but there were a few recent things. What recent things? He looked down at the table. My mom answered for him. He had setbacks. Nothing serious. What kind of setbacks? It means life happens, she snapped. Are you going to interrogate your brother, or are you going to help him? Now it was not a financial decision. It was a morality test. If I asked questions, I was cruel. If I wanted details, I was humiliating him. If I hesitated, I was failing the family. This is not small, I said. If something goes wrong, I'm tied to it. Nothing is going to go wrong, my dad said. You don't know that. We know your brother, my mom said. I almost asked if she meant the same brother who had borrowed money from me twice and repaid it only after I reminded him for months. But I held it back because I could already see how the room would react. They would not hear it as context. They would hear it as an attack. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. The room changed instantly. My mom's face hardened. Jason stared at me like I had slapped him, and my dad looked disappointed in that quiet way that always made me feel 12 years old. Why not? My mom asked. Because I found out about this 10 minutes ago. It's your brother. That doesn't make it a good decision. Jason leaned forward with the first real emotion he had shown all night. I would do it for you. Maybe he believed that, but I did not. I had seen how he handled money, how promises became vague once they were inconvenient, and how my parents stepped in over and over, smoothing his mistakes into bad luck until no one was allowed to call them choices. I need time to think, I said, pushing the folder back toward the center of the table. My mom shook her head slowly. We don't have time. That sentence told me the truth. This was not the beginning of the process. This was the part where they needed me to catch up. I left soon after, but I knew before I even reached my car that the conversation was not over. For a few hours they went quiet, and for one stupid moment I hoped they had realized how badly they handled it. By the next morning, that hope was dead. My phone started buzzing before I got out of bed. The first message was from my mom, saying Jason was stressed and that she hoped I was not going to make this harder than it needed to be. There was no greeting, no attempt to check in, just a direct push back into the same pressure. I did not answer right away. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and replayed the dinner in my head. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became that everything had been staged. The favorite food, Jason arriving early, the folder on the table, and my dad already knowing what to say from the living room all pointed to the same thing. They had not invited me to discuss anything. They had invited me to complete something. By the time I checked my phone again, there were more messages. My dad wanted me to call him so we could handle this properly. Jason said the house was a great deal and he could show me the numbers. My mom followed that with a message telling me not to drag things out. That last part annoyed me the most because I had not said no. I had only refused to say yes immediately, and apparently that was enough to make me the obstacle. I called my dad first because I thought he might be the easiest person to reason with. He picked up quickly, almost like he had been sitting with the phone in his hand. "Good," he said. "Let's handle this." "I'm not comfortable signing anything yet," I told him. "I need to understand what I'm being asked to take on." "What is there to understand?" he asked. "Your brother is making the payments. Your name helps him get approved. That's it." "That is not it. If he misses payments, this affects me too." He paused for a moment, not because he had not known that, but because he did not want that part of the conversation to become the focus. "You're looking at it too negatively," he said. "You've always been careful with money, and that is why you're in a position to help." The sentence sounded like a compliment until I heard what was underneath it. My discipline, my savings, my good credit, and my boring responsible choices had all become evidence that I should absorb risk for someone who had not made those same choices. "I need time," I said. "You don't have much time," he replied. "There are deadlines." "How far along is this?" He avoided the question for half a second, which was all the answer I needed. "Far enough that delaying could cause problems," he said. He said delaying as if I had stalled a process I had not even known existed. A few minutes after that call ended, my mom called. I missed the first one on purpose, and she immediately called again, which felt like a preview of the next several days. When I answered, she did not ease into it. "Why are you acting like this?" "Like what?" "Like your brother asked you to give him a kidney. He needs help getting approved. That's all." Then he should have asked before my name was involved. She made a frustrated sound. "Nobody signed anything for you. Stop acting like we stole from you. I'm acting like you tried to make a financial decision around me instead of with me." "You've changed," she said, lowering her voice. "You used to care about this family." That was the old hook, the one she had used for years whenever I pushed back. If I did not agree, it was not because I had a valid reason. It was because I had become selfish, cold, or distant. "I still care," I said. "That's why I'm not pretending this is harmless." She kept circling back to the same point, insisting nothing would go wrong, Jason would pay, and I was overthinking something simple. I kept trying to bring the conversation back to facts, but facts were not what she wanted. She wanted me emotional enough to give in and guilty enough to feel proud of it. By afternoon, other people started appearing in the situation. My aunt called first, using the overly warm voice people use when they are stepping into something that does not involve them. She said she had heard there was a little issue, my parents were worried, and I had always been the responsible one, which sounded like praise until I realized it was just a polite way of reminding me where the leash was supposed to be. "I haven't said no," I told her. "Sometimes not saying yes is the same thing," she replied. That sentence stayed with me because it showed me how the story had already been framed. I was not a person taking time to think. I was the one holding the family back. I was the responsible son who had suddenly decided to be difficult. Jason kept texting too, sending screenshots of payment estimates and short explanations about the market, the interest rate, and how the house would be worth more later. Every message sounded like he was pitching an investment instead of acknowledging that he needed my credit to buy a house he could not qualify for a loan. The part that made it worse was how little he seemed to understand the difference between my help and my liability. He kept saying I would not have to pay anything, like that was the end of the discussion. When I asked him what would happen if he lost hours at work, got sick, or had another financial setback, he answered with vague confidence instead of a plan. "I'll figure it out," he wrote. That was exactly what scared me. That evening, my mom sent one final message saying they needed an answer that night. She did not ask when I would be comfortable talking, and she did not acknowledge that I had asked for details. She simply set a deadline, as if pressure could turn a bad idea into a reasonable one. I called Jason and told him I wanted the full truth before I made any decision. I wanted to know his income, his debts, the exact loan terms, and why the bank would not approve him without me. He got defensive immediately, saying I was making him feel like a failure, which was not an answer. "If you want me tied to this mortgage," I said, "then I get to know what I'm being tied to." He was quiet for a while, then admitted there had been late payments on a car loan, a credit card balance he had not mentioned, and a personal loan from a friend that was not on the paperwork. None of it was catastrophic by itself, but together it painted a clear picture. He was not just short on one requirement. He was already stretched. When I asked why none of this had come up at dinner, he said, "Because Mom said you'd focus on the wrong stuff." There it was, finally said out loud. My mother had not hidden the details because they were irrelevant. She had hidden them because they made the request look exactly as risky as it was. I told him I was coming over because I wanted to say my answer in person and be done with it. Part of me knew that was walking back into a trap, but another part of me needed there to be no confusion later. No one would be able to say I ignored them, misunderstood them, or refused without hearing them out. When I arrived, my parents were already in the living room. Jason was standing near the fireplace with his arms crossed, and the folder was back on the coffee table like some cursed family centerpiece. This time there was no dinner, no small talk, and no attempt to make the room feel normal. My dad stood slightly when I walked in. "Good. Let's finish this." "I haven't agreed to anything," I said. My mom's jaw tightened. "That's why we're here, so we can finalize it." "You can't finalize something I never agreed to." Jason tried to jump in with a calmer tone. "Can we just go through the numbers again?" "I already understand the numbers," I said. "That's the problem." My mom leaned forward. "Then what exactly is your issue?" "My issue is that you all built this around the assumption that I would say yes, while leaving out information that would make any normal person hesitate." Jason looked at my mom, and she looked back at him fast enough that I knew I had hit something true. "What information?" my dad asked. I turned toward him. "The late car payments, the credit card balance, the personal loan, and the fact that Jason is already stretched enough that all of you knew those details would matter." My dad's expression changed. "Jason, is that accurate?" Jason looked irritated more than ashamed. "It sounds worse when he says it like that." "It sounds worse because it is worse," I replied. My mom stood then, and the controlled version of her started to crack. "So now you came here to embarrass your brother?" "No. I came here because you asked me to risk my credit for him while pretending the risk did not exist." "You're being cruel," she said. "I'm being honest. You are standing in this house, after everything we did for you, and acting like your brother is some stranger trying to scam you." That one almost worked. I felt it for half a second, that familiar pull to soften my tone, reassure her, and say I did not mean it that way. Then I looked at the folder on the coffee table and remembered my name printed there before I had ever been asked. "He is not a stranger," I said. "That is exactly why this hurts." Jason threw his hands up. "It's a mortgage, not a crime. You're acting like I'm trying to ruin your life. I'm acting like you're asking me to put my life on the line for a decision you can't support on your own." "That's what brothers do," he snapped. "They help each other. They also tell each other the truth before asking for help." My mom pointed toward me. "You just want to feel superior." "No," I said. "I want to keep the future I built." My dad stepped in with his calm voice, but by then it sounded less like reason and more like another tool. "There is a middle ground here. You sign, Jason commits to making every payment, and we all move forward." "That is not a middle ground," I said. "That is me signing and everyone promising it will be fine." "Because it will be fine," my mother insisted. "Then he can wait until the bank agrees with you without needing my name." The room went quiet for a few seconds. Jason looked away, my dad rubbed his forehead, and my mom stared at me like I had just insulted her personally. Then she said the thing that ended it for me. "If you walk away from this, don't expect things to be the same between you and this family." There was no softness in her voice and no attempt to dress it up as concern. It was a condition placed beside the folder. "Sign, and you stay. Refuse, and we make you pay emotionally." I looked at all three of them and finally understood that they were not waiting for my decision. They were waiting for my compliance. "I'm not signing," I said. My mom stared at me like she needed another second to process the fact that the answer had arrived, and it was not the one she had built the evening around. "So that's it," she said. "You're turning your back on your brother." "No," I answered. "I'm refusing to take legal responsibility for a mortgage I did not choose, for a house I will not live in, under pressure from people who hid information from me because they knew it mattered." Jason's face tightened. "I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you thought this was okay." My dad gave me that disappointed look again. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it will be my mistake." My mother's eyes narrowed. "If you leave now, you are choosing this." "I know," I replied. "And so are you." I picked up my keys and walked out without slamming the door, because I did not want to give them a scene they could retell later as proof that I was unstable. I drove home in silence, not because I felt calm, but because there was nothing left to rehearse. I had said no, and the version of me they depended on had not shown up. The messages started before I reached my apartment. I did not read them in the parking lot. I went inside, put my keys on the counter, sat down at my kitchen table, and let my phone buzz until the screen went dark. When I finally checked, the messages were exactly what I expected, just coming from different angles. My mom framed my refusal as selfishness and said I had changed. Jason made it sound like I had personally betrayed him, and my dad tried to make the whole thing look like a logic problem by saying I had let emotions interfere with a simple decision. I read everything and did not answer. The next day brought more of the same. My mother moved between anger and wounded silence. Jason sent long messages about how the house was slipping away because of me. My father asked me to think about the consequences of damaging the family over one signature, which was almost funny because one signature was exactly what I had been thinking about from the beginning. Then relatives started texting again. My aunt said my mother had been crying. A cousin I barely spoke to said family is supposed to show up when it matters, and someone else sent a message about how money should never come between siblings, which told me they had been given the version where I was hoarding good credit like a dragon sitting on gold. For a few days, I considered answering everyone with screenshots and explanations. I wanted to show them the paperwork, explain the hidden debts, and prove that I was not refusing because I hated my brother, but because the help being demanded from me was reckless, one-sided, and manipulative from the start. Every time I drafted a message, I deleted it. At some point, I realized that defending myself to people who had already accepted their version would only keep me inside the same system. I would still be reacting, explaining, and trying to prove that my boundary was reasonable enough to be allowed. So I stopped answering. I muted my parents first, then Jason, and when the messages kept coming through relatives, I stopped responding to those too. After a week of constant pressure, I blocked the numbers that needed to be blocked, not because it felt dramatic, but because I was tired of waking up to a family courtroom on my phone. No contact did not feel powerful at first. It felt strange and ugly and heavier than I expected. I had imagined cutting people off would feel clean, but real life does not work that way. Even when you know you are right, there is still a part of you that remembers birthdays, old dinners, inside jokes, and the version of your family you thought existed before money exposed the terms and conditions. The guilt came in waves, especially at night, when everything was quiet and my brain had nothing to do except replay the conversations. I wondered if I should have helped differently, if I had been too cold, or if Jason really would have made every payment and I had ruined something that could have worked out. Then I would remember the folder, not the mortgage by itself, but the folder placed in the center of the table before anyone asked me. I would remember the hidden debts, the relatives being brought in, the deadline, and my mother telling me things would not stay the same if I refused. Every time the guilt tried to rewrite the story, those details brought it back into focus. A couple of months later, I heard through someone else that Jason did not get the house. The approval fell apart after the lender asked for updated information and the seller moved on. From what I heard, he blamed the bank, the market, and me, depending on who he was talking to. Nobody apologized. Nobody admitted they had pushed too hard, and nobody reached out to say that maybe putting my name into the process before asking me had crossed a line. I did not reach out to ask for any of that. By then, the house was no longer the point. It probably had not been the point since the moment I saw my name on that page. The real issue was that I had finally seen how conditional my place in the family became when I stopped being useful. As long as I was reliable, responsible, and available, I was praised. The moment I protected myself, I became selfish. That realization hurt, but it also made everything simpler. I did not lose my family over a mortgage. I lost the illusion that I could belong there without being available for whatever role they assigned me. They did not lose a son or a brother that night. They lost access to someone they had mistaken for a permanent yes, and for the first time in a long time, I stopped feeling guilty for protecting the life I built. Most people just watch and move on. That's fine. But if you've ever had family pressure you into something like this, you already know how it ends.